So starting recording now, and here we are on round 2 of podcasts on the veteran's perspective. I'm your host, Chris, and I have my friend, Mr. Love. If you want to do a quick introduction to yourself, and we'll kind of go from there.
What's going on, people? I'm LeGrand Love, a good friend of Chris here. We served together in the Navy and submarines and whatnot, background in communications on submarines. So that's me in a nutshell, now retired and, doing a whole bunch of things post-military career.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, man, it's been a while now. We're in 2021. I think we served together in like 2012, maybe 2011. So
yeah.
Almost 10 years.
It was Columbus, right?
Yep, Columbus, Hawaii.
Columbus. Oh wow, yeah, Columbus. I retired in 2017. I was only there for 3 years, so 2014 is when I left Columbus. So yeah, it would have been around 2012 to 2014, somewhere in there.
Wow.
That was on the boat.
So yeah, it's good reflection time, right? So
it's enough time passed.
Oh yeah, a lot of differences. So I've invited you on to talk about minimum wage, as I know that's a hot topic, and a lot of people coming out of the military go from a really secure and, despite what they may think, a secure and safe lifestyle where you have guaranteed income, you have free medical care, you have free access to any kind of real mental health or service you can think of, as long as you can get through the bureaucratic chain to get to it and you're patient. And it may not be the best one or the one you chose, but you do have access to everything. And you also have a reduced tax rate in the military, which a lot of people don't understand. So I know as an E5, I was only taxed on about 40% of my income due to the way the military does their income breakdown. So you don't just get a flat rate salary like it's a civilian or an hourly rate. You get basic allowance for housing after a certain rank, which is essentially a stipend that you can use as much or as little as you want to for housing.
Right.
Before you get that, you get barracks room, so it's provided for you. You even get meal time food, and I mean that stuff we could break down, but you only get taxed essentially on your basic income, which is only about 40%. So when you go from making a certain amount in the military and then you get out, you start looking for jobs, and if you get a job that pays the exact same as you were making in the military, all of a sudden you're making way less because you get taxed a lot heavier than you will expect, regardless of what state you're in. And you also get healthcare, which is also expensive, which kind of sent me for a whirl, because my first job I got when I got out was as an electrician, and my healthcare was like $150 a week or biweekly, which I thought was a lot, but I thought it was really bad. And it was really good health insurance. But coming out of the military, I didn't understand that. So So that's been kind of my overview of what we're going to talk about today. And there's a big drive, as you've seen in social media, for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So we could go in depth on what the concept of minimum wage is, but I think when you take something that was established, in the 50s, 60s, and has translated into the modern era, it kind of doesn't match. Even if that person, FDR is going to push that, I don't think it would fit today's society and what basic needs are. So given that, what's been your opinion? Getting out of the military, you were a chief, so you were actually making pretty decent income, especially in Hawaii, not counting any disability or retirement pay you have. Just what's been your experience and what you've been doing, if you want to like touch on that and go into what you've experienced work-wise.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I think is pretty important to make sure we keep it in context is something you said. You just like keeping out retirement and disability and all those things. But I think that's a factor that you have to keep in mind, right? I think you really have to remember the fact that if you're just separating, right, and you didn't do 20 years and retire, or you are medically retired, there's a lot of benefits that you're not getting as far as monetary, means each month, that if you did retire or you were medically separated, that you would be getting, right? So
and it's a huge difference, yeah, because that's untaxed. Yeah,
it's not taxed. Well, your retirement is.
Okay.
Your retirement is. Your disability isn't. Okay.
Right.
So like when I first retired, my disability was at 40%. So that's what I was getting. But it was only a portion of my retirement at that point, because the way this kind of works is when you retire, if you get disability and your retirement, let's say for instance, I'm retiring as a chief, and then my disability is at 40%. Well, it's sort of there's this threshold you have to cross in order to actually see a separate sort of check, I guess you would put it that way, right?
They kind of weigh them against each other to determine what you will receive.
So if you have 40%, you just get a portion of your retirement tax-free.
I see. Yep.
Okay. And now, so I went and I had to do just some evaluations and things like that about some other things that I had going on. And they raised my retirement up to, my disability up to 70%. Now, once you cross over 50%, then you get your retirement, which is going to be taxed, but then you get a separate disability check as well.
That's a really good point for if anyone is currently in the military and they're thinking about getting out and they're aiming for that 20 years. You have to understand, one, the disability and filing for that stuff is complicated and stressful in and of itself, because you have to have proof that it was military service connected, and you have to have medical records. So you got to make sure that you actually get the appointment. And then the fact that it doesn't add, so if you were budgeting for a set retirement amount and then thinking you were like, oh, I have this thing, my docs all say I have it, I have all the paperwork, I know I'm going to get 20%. It's actually not going to work out that way. It's actually going to be, like you said, they'll just take that retirement and change your tax rate. They're not going to give you that extra X amount on top.
Right. If your disability isn't over that 50%, then you can pretty much guarantee that, what you're going to be getting is just a portion of your retirement money tax free. Now, I say that to say this, you're talking about the minimum wage, and that's a huge thing for not just people who haven't been in the military, but everybody, right?
Oh yeah.
It's a big thing, and I've been following it quite heavily, just because of what I'm doing right now, which is starting a nonprofit. And part of all these things that I'm doing is just kind of looking at these types of situations and saying to myself, like, wow, something needs to be done about this, something needs to be done about that, or whatever. And they can talk all day about it, we can talk all day about it, but really, in all honesty, I don't feel like our administration, this one or the former one, really cares. To be completely honest with you, I don't think that it's the press. Well, the issue has been raised enough so that they will really do something about it. I think that something would have been done about it if once they passed this last COVID relief bill, that they would have just and they probably couldn't do it, but I feel like they would have found a way to make that happen. Right, $15 an hour really isn't a lot. And let me tell you,
the problem, I would say, let me highlight the point you're making there, is that, that's a layered issue there because it's politics. So the political engine is influenced the most by what? Donors, unfortunately. So the people that are influencing who's making policy, who's pushing bills, who is gonna help you get reelected, because I think it's been widely disseminated that like most of these people in Congress, Senate, they spend most of their time fundraising to get reelected to keep their job. So how many people on minimum wage are going to be able to influence them as much as a couple of super PAC donors? So I think that's a portion too, is the way that our elections and our political process are working are no longer democratic voice, but more monetary influence, because like you're saying, it's not important enough because they're not a minimum wage and society's working and people are making money. And there's always going to be someone who is hungry enough to take that minimum wage job. I know that when I started working, I took that job making minimum wage in Missouri at Steak and Shake for $5.25 an hour because it's what I could get and I needed money. And I was stoked to quit that job and go get a new job where I made $7.25 an hour. And that was a huge pay raise for me. But it was not enough to live on. So, this was 2006, 2007. And I remember I was splitting a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 other people, paying $300 a month rent. And I was broke all the time. Like I was working 40 hours a week, but I wasn't a full-time employee. So it was like 35. And, it was impossible to even, I was barely hanging on making that kind of money. So
you asked about like the posts, and I completely agree with what you're saying as far as super PACs and things like that, and the fundraising that these politicians are doing. that sort of prevent them from doing things like, what needs to be done for the average everyday working American citizen, which is, hey, look, let's raise that, minimum wage and make that a, something that people are able to make a living wage. One of the things that I was looking at when I was, coming up with this idea for this nonprofit, really not really coming up with the idea, but just kind of thinking about what sort of business model I wanted to use for this business I'm looking at right now. I was looking at the minimum wage in Georgia, as a matter of fact. I live here in Los Angeles, but what I want to do is in media. I feel like Georgia was a great place because it's starting to boom pretty heavily. And sort of the next wave of what's going to be happening in Georgia as far as, film and television was going, I felt like that would be a great place. But I looked at the minimum wage there and dude, I was like, wow, people are hurting, they're extremely, just impoverished circumstances that they don't have to be in, especially in an economy like that, where you have billions upon billions of dollars being funneled into that economy from the film and television industry, from places like maybe New York and LA, all of that work is really going into the state of Georgia. However, people are still working minimum wage jobs, and that, the average everyday person is not participating in that, in that revenue, which is
so
really.
I think, just to make sure I'm tracking what you're saying, so we're talking about the media industry. I mean, we know they make tons of money, and there are people working in that industry getting paid dismal salaries, essentially, for, I would say, in often cases, technical or requiring work that should be earning more money. And while you were talking about that, my first thought was, a union would protect them. And for some reason, America has become anti-union, which doesn't make any sense to me. That is crazy to me. If you think about what people went through to get unions when we had, industrial revolution, and, children were working for, quarters a day, and, people were living in abysmal situations, and they finally got this right to unionize. And now it seems like the working class is against unions, which blows my mind, because I've met a lot of electricians and people in unions, and they are living really, their work is hard, but they're living great. They get they get a really good, lifestyle. They get guaranteed pension. They get to argue for the, they're really well taken care of. So one, I would highlight people talk to people in unions. Two, I would say read up on them and support them, because I think unions would fix a lot of our problems with income inequality. Sorry to kind of derail you there, but I think
I mean, it's totally fine.
Yeah, targets what you're highlighting there of the conditions in Georgia. Well,
I mean, I really wasn't, referring to people who are already in the industry. Yes, you're right. They are protected by your unions. I mean, if you work, as a grip or, whatever, like there are unions for these different skill sets and these types of workers that are in certain fields, right? Some fields you're not going to find a union for them, but for the most part, the major ones, you will absolutely find different unions in the film and television.
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
So that does work. What I'm more or less referring to is the people who, who haven't had the type of training like I've had the opportunity to get. Thank goodness for, having VA benefits that I was able to use to go to school. Because without those types of things, that type of training, it is extremely hard, even with them. Even with that training, it's still hard to get your foot in the door, right? And think about this, right?
Especially if you're making minimum wage to get there,
True. And the minimum wage here is a lot different from where you are. You said $7.25 or $5.25. Here,
well, that was it went up to $7.50, I think, or $7.25.
Right. And this is the trippy thing about it, right? They say raise the minimum wage up to $15. Here, I believe the minimum wage is already at $15.25, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. However,
I'm sorry. Are you in California?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
But that's just this county. That's Los Angeles County. You go outside of Los Angeles County, and that all of a sudden changes, right?
Yeah,
so
what's the cost of living there? Yeah,
it's way more expensive. Right? So just to give you an example, I was when I first retired and I started school, obviously I was getting the BAH and all those things. So I was pretty good to go. I decided to to do some, just do a part-time job, and I was working at the school, so it wasn't like I was going out and getting a job or anything like that. And the reason why I did that is because the VA has work study, so you get paid through the VA for working, and while you're in college, right? For the school. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of other students that were getting that minimum wage or whatever, they were hurting. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, you're in college and you're trying to make some extra money, and things like that. And I was really surprised to talk to some students and hear how they were living. It was very surprising to me, because of my conditions, and just kind of thinking about everything that I was getting. Like, that was my support system. The VA benefits was my support system. And so,
which I think fairly you deserve and earned. I mean, that was part of the compensation package you signed up
Absolutely.
for.
Absolutely.
I think it's so. If anyone's listening to this and they're not a veteran, they're like, "Oh, you just got it easy because you did 20 years on submarines. You definitely deserve at least that much at a minimum."
Right.
So, my wife just came in with the dogs. So when you talk to those some of those people, they sorry about that.
That's fine.
And that's at $1,525. But what's the average rent price there?
The average rent price?
Mm-hmm.
I was paying $1,500 on a studio. I now pay like $1,700 on a one bedroom.
And if you're talking about having any kind of basic medical coverage, electricity, water, you really need internet in today's society, especially if you're going to college, especially during the pandemic. So yeah, podcasts definitely.
No, I said I have gas. I have gas stove and.
Well, yeah, but there's a utility cost, so that's
there's utility costs.
Probably $2,000 to $2,200 depending on what you're doing, and then food. Even if you cook at home only and you're getting cheap groceries, it still racks up quickly, and the taxes. So. All right, now buy books. Now work full time, do that, and go to college full time in a serious and earnest way. It gets really difficult.
Yes.
Unless you do a huge commute, and then that has its own costs associated with it, because then you have to assume you have a car, you have to pay insurance. So I think that one portion of it is that a lot of these decisions should be at a state and local level, how they work out their minimum wage requirements based on the cost of living of the area, because you can't set a national minimum wage requirement and expect people in Arkansas in the woods where it's or in farmland. I mean, you have so many different or pre-COVID Manhattan, what's the minimum wage for pre-COVID Manhattan? Do you get a different minimum wage if you're migrating or you're traveling into the city? Maybe that could, so it becomes complicated. But I think that kind of stuff would fall more on local government, where average citizens, I would say, have more voice and influence if they get involved in that kind of stuff. So, because I think the minimum wage here is $7.25. Yeah.
They would have to, right? I mean, at the state and local level, that's what you're kind of expecting for the citizens to be doing, is advocate for themselves, right? That's the reason why we have the state and local governments, so we can go to them and say, this is a problem. We need these things taken care of. This is the reason why we put you here in these capacities, elected you in these, into these positions. So, it doesn't all have to fall on the federal government, but I do feel like there is some influence that should come from the federal government to start to sway the local and state levels, in these directions, right?
And I think
I don't know what that is, but
I mean, that should be like the check and balance. So, if your state and local government is doing it, but they're not handling it right, then as a citizen, you're a full citizen, so we should have the right to appeal almost, or have a way to say, hey, which agency in the federal government is managing this minimum wage stuff? Hey, they're only paying $5.25, but look at the numbers. That doesn't make sense. You guys need to hold them accountable, and then hold the state accountable. And that's where you get that kind of good influence, because I think everyone needs carrot and stick.
You think about the way that, our commands were funded, right? So, each year, there's a certain amount of money that's allocated to this command for certain things that they ought to have to do, as far as logistics, as far as, training or whatever, right? There's a certain amount of money that's dedicated to each one of those commands.
Right.
That money is regulated, in a way that it says, okay, well, you cannot do these things with this money over here because it's for supplies or whatever. It's for this thing, right? And so, what we were doing was there was a system that was already set in place, right? Those checks and balances were already there, and it's being, monitored by Big Brother, if that was Squadron or whatever. It was being monitored by someone, making sure that we were doing the right things with that, that funding, right? And so, but at a local level, if we could dictate when, we needed to use that. It wasn't like someone else was telling us, you have to use that now to buy this part for the periscope. That wasn't the situation, right? We didn't need it, then we
didn't buy it. Yeah,
we didn't buy it, right?
And if you went over budget, you had to go without sometimes.
Right, and if you did use it, when you didn't need to, that's waste, fraud, and abuse. So like all those things are being tracked. At these levels, the problem with, even as far up as that thing we were talking about earlier with the super PACs, is that these things aren't being monitored. Right. If that were the case, why in the hell is Gat sitting here, with all these allegations about him paying for women? You know what I'm saying? Like that's you have to think about that. Gates, he's from Florida. Not a congressman. I think he's a representative from Florida.
I saw an article saying he was trying to go on Fox News or something. Yeah.
And of course, you're going to dance around that, but you're using your their election, not election money,
campaign
donations.
Oh yeah,
right, for this kind of behavior, right? These are people, and it ain't just, it's not.
Can you imagine like a CEO PACs, or like
right? They have local constituents who are sending them money as well. It's not just your super PACs. It's local people,
and that blows my mind.
Okay, grandma is sending in her $20-$30 a week to help this guy.
And it still blows my mind that we're in 2021, and with all the digital advancements we have in the cyber security and the banking, obviously some of it, there's always going to be better hackers, there's always going to be someone better tech, but the ability to do accounting for federal and public employees, that should be mandated. If you want to be a public servant, you should have an open bank account. I'm not saying they should be able to pull your money, but you should be tracked, and how your funds are used should be tracked. And you should be drug tested like every day. There's a whole bunch of
it shouldn't require this. It shouldn't be some incident that happens that all of a sudden makes everyone turn and start to look at you. When you're in that position, you've been elected by your constituents in that whatever area you're representing, and they should be, able to go and say, okay, we're hiring or we want to have an independent audit of whatever, finances have been contributed to this particular politician, and figure out where the money is coming from, where is it going, and how the funds are being spent. If you were investing into into a particular type of stock, you would have eyes on that. You have the ability to look and see where your money is going.
I'm pretty sure they're required. I mean, that's a huge thing, is like insider trading and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So we're getting off the topic of minimum wage, but I think this is a core point of accountability and why it's not important. As for raising minimum wage, my perspective coming out of the military was, one, hopefully you won't be making minimum wage, but there's always a chance that whatever great skill you have or wherever you are, you may have to fall back on a minimum wage job. And ideally, if you're financially making good decisions, you should have enough that a minimum wage could help you tide you over till you get back to that skilled trade job. But you never know what the situation is. I mean, that doesn't speak for everybody. But if I had to go on 725, I would lose my house, my cars. I would have to get rid of my dogs. I definitely couldn't afford my insurance so I think there's a lot of things, and I want to do another podcast coming up because we're coming up on time about healthcare, especially coming out of the military and our perspective. So those are my closing thoughts on it. I think that state and local level should mandate, like, they should be involved more heavily in tracking cost of living in the area, housing costs, food costs. They should be able to pull these pretty readily and easily with some software. I mean, everything's on the internet now. You could track prices pretty easily, and everybody pays taxes, so costs. Like all this stuff is being submitted. So that kind of program would be pretty lightweight and easy to do. So I think that should be one part. State and local government should maintain it. Federal government should hold them accountable to make sure that they're meeting some kind of ratio, of that cost of living in this area or that area without gerrymandering, to make sure that people aren't under the poverty line and are able to make decent, lifestyle with healthcare, with food, and with basic necessities to meet, the needs. So that's my 2 cents.
You should like do these where you release them in like segments, and that way
I think I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
And do the whole thing, you know what I'm saying, and just release like different parts of it. But anyway, when it comes to the minimum wage, it absolutely is one of those critical things that has to be looked at on all levels. And if it's not something that's mandated by the federal government, it absolutely has to be something that citizen is in your areas. You get together with your state and local government and you push for it, right? You're paying your taxes, you're paying, you know what I'm saying, to have the roads and make sure.
And at a minimum, we're all American citizens.
Exactly.
That's worth a lot, I think.
Just the idea that a person, who pays taxes isn't able to, afford decent, decent food for their children or clothes for their children. People are working 60, 70 hours a week, you know what I'm saying, and scraping by. That should never be a situation in this country, and so, the minimum wage has to be fixed. And coming out of the military, that was a big, huge eye opener. I think we both, worked minimum wage jobs and kind of saw that happening. It was like, no, I'm this cannot do right here at all. So
just for perspective, before, a while back, I had that job. When I first got out of the military, I thought I got the golden goose. I was making $70K base pay a year in Northern Virginia, 40 minutes outside of DC. I was struggling, and I had me, my wife, a dog, and health insurance. I was trying to save money because I wanted, to move up and around, and just the cost of living in, that apartment in that area. I didn't understand that 70K was nothing for this area. I had my monthly bills with everything for like house, utility, phone, paid off phones, like no debt. I had no debt on my credit, was about $2,000 to $2,200 a month before groceries. And then, after taxes and everything, you're looking at $2,500 a month with overtime. And so, it's tough, especially if you're trying to save for a house or, if something happens. But yeah, so
so to all the vets, if you are watching this, I would absolutely say, if you're close to that, to that point where you can do your retirement or you can get to retirement, I would absolutely do that, man, because it's so much. But I mean, just, a ballpark figure, I'm making more than half of, that 70K, way more than half of that 70K in just money that comes in and it's free. I'm not talking about like BH and all that stuff for being in school. It's just like the retirement, the disability, it absolutely helps out. And
it's a game changer.
It's a game changer, right? Because now if I take a minimum wage job, I'm not worried about, okay, am I going to be able to pay bills? I still have a decent amount of money that's coming in every month, that I'm not technically working for, if you want to say it that way. I
you definitely earned it.
You earned it, but I don't want to, I don't want to.
But you're not, you don't have to do paperwork every month. It's just like, right. It's your reward for what you did for the country. And I would say, to wrap up on and go with what you're saying, really look at the numbers because I got out at 11 years and I think I made the right decision for me and what I wanted to do with my life and my family. And I'm glad I did, especially with just how things are going for me. But look at where you're at, look at where you're trying to go, and look at what kind of career you want to get into, because the civilian world is much different. It's much more expensive. It's much less caring. However you think your command feels about you now, I promise you, they care. I won't use multiplication because 0 times anything is still 0. So an employer will let the best employee go for no reason. They have 0 loyalty to you. Virginia is an at-will state, so you don't even get like a 2 weeks notice like, hey, we're firing you. It's just like, don't come in tomorrow. No paycheck for you, buddy. So it's pretty cutthroat out here. So pick your state, pick your taxes, look at state taxes. I have a buddy who bought a house and thought he was going to pay one amount and get another amount from his paycheck, and he ended up paying $3,600 a month for his house. He's only making $4,000 a month after taxes. So do your math right, do your taxes, keep listening to the veteran's perspective, and you'll see me and Mr. Love here shortly again. I think, how do you feel talk about medical coverage
Let's do it.
and kind of touch on that next time?
Whenever you want, let's do it.
All right. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time. Look for this series coming up. Please hit the subscribe and like, and in the comments, please let us know what you think about the minimum wage, what we're saying, and if we're saying anything totally wrong, please chime in, give us your 2 cents, and we will address it in the next video. Thanks, everyone.